Welcome to the June 26th bhyve production user call. We have Jan, Andrew, Gibran, Hans, and myself, Michael, so far. And I would like to propose a few field days. We've not had great luck with hackathons insofar as there's always something to discuss, so we take the call to discuss it, and then we never get around to, say, sitting down together and working on things. And some of that requires some very much coordination with subject matter experts. But I'll just put them out there. We can either discuss them now or later. Some are new topics, some are recent topics, and some are perennial topics. Number one, we had a great discussion yesterday on the OpenCFS call. Thank you, Gibran, about the various knobs you can turn in ZFS on a host and a VM running ZFS insofar as you do not want write amplification, you do not want double caching or buffering, you do not want a whole bunch of things to go wrong or record size mismatches. And we all seem to have our instincts on that, but I suspect a very focused few hours on simply running through reproducible tests where you step through each knob would be mutually beneficial. I know you had some science to try, and we look forward to your results, Jaban. Any thoughts or comments on what is needed to have such a field day hackathon thingamathon?
Access to the hardware, especially when it comes to device pass-through. Someone actually has to be there to plug devices into different slots. So that's IOMMU group problems and so on, and remote access to out-of-band management via WireGuard or whatever.
I think you're jumping ahead, but yes, that actually applies to most of these. So I'll add that in while you say that. Physical access, I'll call it broadly BMC because some call it ILO, iDirect, IPMI, and I can't type that quickly, but very good point. And actually, let's maybe even say GPU and I'll say even just NIC pass through, because if there's an improved IOMMU for AMD, we should very much give that some exercise. AMD IOMMU. Thank you. If someone's at a real keyboard, feel free to improve upon that. So overlapping is GPU and NIC pass-through and virtualization of SRIOV, you name it. I have not had a chance to try a discrete Intel NIC, GPU A series, but that's certainly one to give it a go. Insofar as last time I tried Intel iGPU support, Linux worked great, Windows worked terribly, and this is very much somewhere I want Alexei to be a part of. And Andrew, I know you have a distinct interest in some amount of GPU pass-through for Illumos and specifically OmniOS, if I'm not mistaken.
At least a bit.
And that's where Hans, if we find that there are some GPT, GDVG, all those acronyms from Intel bits missing on Illumos, hopefully Corvin has some not too alien patches that could benefit Illumos. Because I do recall you having some experience in that land.
I do.
Awesome. So
VCI works on Illumos. What does not work is the GPU pass-through, because Corvin's patches have not been ported to Illumos.
So have you taken a few minutes to see what might be involved to bringing those in, a bit like the reverse of CPU ID bits?
I did look at this last summer,
okay,
when I wanted to get it work, but since I didn't get it to work even on FreeBSD, I didn't pursue this any further.
Oh, it's nice to have a point of reference. Yeah. Working point of reference, rather.
This was with a integrated GPU and integrated into the CPU. That didn't for whatever reason. Probably something related to the Intel GPU firmware that's embedded in the UEFI firmware that did not run correctly.
Got it.
Anyway, from what I have seen, porting the changes that Corvin did for FreeBSD, porting them to Illumos does involve a bit of actual porting because he's doing stuff that is FreeBSD specific, as in finding the device and accessing some of its bars and all that kind of stuff. That isn't too hard to adapt to Illumos. It just would need a device, a system where I can test this, where I can see it working on FreeBSD, and then I can take this information over to Illumos and adapt it as needed.
Okay.
Also, it's, as far as I know, only working on Intel. The AMD IOMMU driver has not been adapted to Illumos. That's also something that still needs to be done.
That's actually a very good point there, and I did mention it just now, but I didn't have the 4 brain cells to rub together to realize that Illumos may have brought in the initial bhyve shim for AMD IOMMU. So there was a vast amount of work done by the foundation to remedy that FreeBSD Foundation, such that if that is candidate code for Illumos, hey, have at it. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone to not have that or have to go through catching that up. So I will make a little note here. FreeBSD AMD IOMMU code. So that's definitely some love to share, if possible. So, Jan, are you being the saint who's punching in a whole bunch of little details here? Yes, USB controllers.
Yes.
Ooh, I do have a suitable USB controller that I know has been tested on Illumos on the OS, so that's okay. Okay, we're talking hardware lab. Yes, sir.
For a hackathon, I think it would be important to have at least one person who's fairly responsive, able to reseat cards in different slots or different boards to actually test if something doesn't just work on an Intel board, but also on an AMD board and so on. Especially for IOMMUs and so on. And then have a selection of cards. Doesn't have to be the latest and greatest, but
Sure.
at least representatives of relevant families of chips to mess around with, and then so that whoever is running around playing remote hands doesn't go stir crazy and the others aren't too impatient. It would really help. There's remote VPN access to both BMC and for the system console and normal power cycling. And if something really needs a cold start, it would be nice to have a remote accessible power distribution unit as well, so that you actually can completely cold start the system if it's necessary to reset something. Because
I think a
sometimes
warm body is a good substitute, but yeah.
Yeah, a warm body is kind of unresponsive by design. And maybe if several people are hacking on different systems, one remote warm body in the lab, maybe he wants to leave the lab because it's loud, or just to get to his own workstation.
Okay.
So yeah, having the ability to actually turn individual power plugs on and off and remote into the BMCs via whatever WireGuard, OpenVPN, IPsec if you really like to suffer. Would be nice to have.
Got it. And that does broadly apply to all of these. And it does remind me that Alexei helped me get AMD iGPU, for lack of a better term, their built-in GPU to work, and he thought it was the first he's ever seen, and that was cool. It was on a little
Yeah.
B-Link system with a Ryzen CPU. So there's hope, and it's worth getting all this straightened up for future releases of each OS. Thank you very much.
Heck, it would be really nice if we had a little checklist in the FreeBSD wiki to run regression tests during the release candidate phase, or
Oh,
even
goodness.
a bit
Well, yeah,
earlier, so that you can
big
actually try.
stuff, yeah.
Does this driver update break the Intel NIC, or the Mellanox, or the Chelsea?
Yeah.
But of course, this kind of hardware lab is not something the FreeBSD project or foundation are prepared or maybe even able to sponsor.
Yes. That said, that it
But
should be distributed across the world with people with their unique hardware and
and
each taking responsibility for something tiny, or else
yes,
it's
no,
trying
but
to boil
our
the
problem
ocean.
is that the current structure where we have committers as developers is not really
Mm.
what you have, because lots of experienced operators will not have a commit bit. So the guys with the fancy lab hardware probably won't have a commit bit until they're doing something very FreeBSD specific, like Netflix or whatever.
I think those are decoupled. And check out
But
my
yeah,
talk from BSD Can about writing good bug reports. Anyone
the-
can write a bug report, and hopefully Mark Johnson and company fix it. So you want the expertise in the right spot. Well, cool.
yes, but there are people who already have suitable lab environments.
Yep. Olivia.
But how do you get the trust other than just meeting somewhere and then doing it
Yeah.
ad hoc to
Well, a
give someone
reproducible
access to
bug is a
some lab or
reproducible
whatever?
bug. Okay. Question for you, Jans or Gibran or whoever else is in FreeBSD land. Do we know anything about the checklist that the release engineers go through for FreeBSD or OmniOS releases? Is there a published list like we must do this and test this, or is it just kind of we
Maybe
do what we care about?
ask Colin what the
Okay,
team is doing for 15.
I've heard of him. Okay, do the official test lists exist? Uh, sorry, let me rephrase that. Are the official list public? I can type on this phone. Are the official lists public? Cool. Well, let me just round this out and we can just throw in our thoughts on this. We've had some great discussions lately that kind of transcend the topic-specific calls, which is software-defined networking overlays, tunnels, and goodies. And thank you, Jan, for making a simple controllerless Ethernet overlay, which is both linked in the doc here and described in the last two calls. So I think in Illumos land, they say turn it on in Crossbow and just laugh themselves to sleep while we all struggle on FreeBSD. But we have like so many different components to choose from that it first takes a fundamental understanding of the networking at layer 2 and layer 3, which I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm definitely no expert with. And it's like, well, what do we want to achieve? And I very much love Dave's contributions on, his vision, very well described at EuroBSDCon Coimbra, about his nifty databases with, I think, zero tier, and they can just show up anywhere on the network and they do the right thing. And that's kind of where I think we all want to be, and not struggle with our encrypted tunnel of choice. I cannot believe my Mac is not doing WireGuard, but Windows does it beautifully. And of course, given that we have all these lovely downloadable, shareable VPN configurations, can we add multi-factor authentication such that if someone grabs your config, they suddenly have keys to the kingdom, and oops, So that's come up in a few conversations lately, but heck, I don't know if we should talk about networking on each call a little bit or have a dedicated networking call or hijack one. It's up to you. It's your calls, not mine. And as I've hinted here, in mapping this out, the metrics of success and failure are pretty important. Like when it comes to that storage, the storage mismatches, well, what exactly does right amplification look like, be it both in wasted space and performance, and what do those mismatches look like, and what is it we are looking for, and then what is our metric of, say, success when we're measuring performance. So yeah, it's a can of worms. It's all a bit of a hybrid and culmination of everything we've discussed since 2018 on a lot of these, but I will keep pushing on it and seeing what forms this can take. And any thoughts on that, my kind of broad babbling, or go ahead, think what those field days would look like, hackathons, you pick your term of choice, PUD-a-thons, hackathons, production user call-a-thon or something. We need a snarky name. Anyway, think about that. Jan, you mentioned that Ivy has some IF bridge fixes. Would you like to open up those reviews in your browser? Tell us more.
So one of
Okay.
the things where FreeBSD is lacking until now is that we don't have VLAN filtering support built into our bridge drivers. So it's a VLAN, rare VLAN transparent bridge right now. So the forwarding state is already per VLAN, but you cannot assign specific VLANs to specific ports within the bridge driver. If you want to do this in FreeBSD 14, you have to use the firewall to do it, which is inefficient and annoying to configure. And yeah, and Ivy has an open review about to be committed, hopefully, which implements both per bridge member VLAN lists, and in the next edition, then the so-called SVI ports, so that the host can attach to specific VLANs directly without having to do some kind of per member with the VLAN interface on that to get at the untagged traffic for a specific VLAN. If both of those go in before 15 stable, we will have it in 15.0. Which means it's a lot easier to create a bridge, connect bhyve guests to it, and then assign their tab interface specific allowed VLANs as a member, instead of having to set up a firewall to do that.
Does Crossbow currently handle this? And you're just smirking at us?
Oh yes, it does.
Okay.
They have reason to smirk at us.
Better late than never. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Ivy. That is awesome. And I believe Ivy's been producing some rather interesting bridge improvements over the last few months. But very cool. Anything else relating to that? Do you think that has performance implications or any mention there, or it should just
It
work?
should be negligible for untagged traffic. The
Brilliant.
VLAN list per port is a 4 kilobit bit mask. So it's basically testing if that specific bit is 0, that's or 1. That's a very cheap operation.
Nice.
It should be a rounding error compared to all the other overhead of a bridge driver.
Cool. A beautiful little girl just told me that breakfast is ready. I am not here to discourage you in any way, shape, or form about to continue this discussion, but I will frame it with a broad exit time. Do you have other topics to discuss, particularly if you are in Germany and perhaps have that hackathon coming up? Hans, for what it's worth, if you're crossing the divide between Lumos and FreeBSD, there is a Berlin hackathon coming up next month. Do you have the dates for that?
No, in Berlin.
Jan? Yes, and if it's something like, hey, it would be great if someone could cover your train ticket or something, reach out and maybe we can help get you there because your wisdom is appreciated. You are one of the, actually, going down my long list of dual stack FreeBSD and Lumos developers, regardless of the depth on each, you are one of the most experienced, believe it or not. So it looks like, Jan, you're bringing up the hackathon date.
Can you tell me where I can find that?
A quick search of FreeBSD wiki hackathon should spit that out. What on earth? So yes, there's a 2507. There you go. That's the page. Yep, it's now in the doc. There's an outdoor pool. Okay, well there we go. Saturday the 12th and 13th. With profound irony, I land in Barcelona like 2 days later, so I miss it. And my wife needs to be in Riga like 3 days earlier, so we kind of didn't know about all these things when we booked our travel. Anyhow, such is life.
I would love it, but I'll be in Regensburg that weekend.
Hey, really? Okay, that might be nice. Or you can hack there too. I don't know.
To pick up 200 kilograms of sugar for my bees. So in a way, it's bhyve related.
Ah, yes. Well, can that be done by Deutsche Post or something?
Tried that last year,
Yeah.
and stuff is delivered in little buckets.
Ah.
And but basically all the buckets went open during transport and stuff spilled out.
That's not good.
It was
I
quite a
can
mess.
picture that. Yeah, I bet your wife wants to go while you're doing this. I don't know. Well, think about it. There are the facts.
It'd be awesome,
I have-
but I won't be there.
Ah. But that was a beautiful bhyve segue to the overloading of that term. Okay, gang, I will step away. I highly encourage you to continue. Yes, Andrew?
I was gonna say I do have something I wanted to at least briefly discuss.
Please, absolutely.
One of the things that I'm testing on still Windows 2022 is now I'm doing performance comparisons between bhyve on Lumos and Proxmox,
Uh-huh.
and I'm at least initially I haven't really been able to do what I could consider comparable ones where I've got the exact same hardware. I'm going to be trying to do that like today, but at least just eyeballing it based on not identical hardware. I seem to be encountering some pretty serious performance issues. So,
In which areas?
well, okay, this is the dumbest test ever.
Okay, I'm stepping away from that, but I've left a spot on the document for preliminary discoveries, and I look forward to your executive summary.
So don't laugh at me too hard. It's what the customer did on his test. But literally, we're taking and we're installing MSSQL and how long the installer takes. And so what I'm seeing is on bhyve, I'm seeing something like 20 to 40 minutes. On Proxmox, which should be a relatively similar machine. I'm going to be testing identical machines today, or actually the same, swapping out the OS disks on the same machine. I'm seeing something like 45 minutes.
So 45 instead of 25?
No, 45 instead of 5.
Oh,
So I mean, we're talking about like something like 10 times longer. And I don't
so
know. I mean, like I said, I'm going to have better numbers today. I just started dealing with this
mhm.
really at this level, looking at this week. So, and really heavily over the last couple days. So I did. This is just preliminary
I
information.
I haven't installed MS SQL in ages, so I don't know what we install on us. But even 5 minutes, I think, is shocking for installing a database, an empty one, that is.
Oh,
Yeah, I have installed it recently. It does take a while, even on bare metal.
Do
I think
but
look at I experienced a similar issue. We discussed it yesterday with the ZFS on ZFS. And when I switched off, when I made the record sizes bigger on the host machine, and switched off compression, and then enabled metadata compression on the on the on the on the VM, that seemed to improve the performance dramatically. But it's a very tricky one.
and well, how similar are the guest drivers you're using inside the Windows guest? Are both using virtualized NVMe, or is
yes.
one using a part of a virtualized driver?
Both are using virtualized NVMe.
Are they fetching any kind of last minute updates also on during the installation so that you have a tiny little installer which fetches the latest version at install time? Or is it a normal?
What I am,
It's
let me tell you my
MSR.
process for the test. My process for the test is to do an install, uninstall it, and do it again so that it's prefetched everything that it would to make sure it's consistent. Because
Mhm.
I'm actually making sure it's consistent with what the customer was seeing on, because they're comparing it to a physical machine. And so I wanted to get something similar to that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there could be some kind of, I don't know, blocking on telemetry or some bullshit like that. That, oh, if the telemetry service is slow to respond or whatever, then the installer will not finish.
It doesn't seem to be. I will record.
Yeah.
I can record video and stick somewhere of it.
I guess running something like FIO and mprime would be good. So a pure CPU benchmark, a pure disk benchmark, maybe a network benchmark as well. Install something, I don't know, either 64 or whatever, and torture test it a bit. And see which tests are very different.
Well, I mean, well,
Because of course your test is a real world use case which is important to your customer. So it is important, but it is a bad test case for narrowing down where the differences are.
yeah.
Because
I mean, I get it.
could be as simple as someone has defaulted to a pathological block size or whatever. Or Windows uses different timers and schedulers because it knows about QEMU but not about bhyve, or the other way around.
That's kind
Yeah.
of something like that. It seems possibly likely to me.
Yeah,
'Cause I
there is
think-
also the thing with the TPM. With the TPM, does QEMU do TPM pass through?
Is
Okay.
that relevant to server versions of Windows?
I think so, especially on 2022. Let me check.
I find multiple claims that Windows Server 2022 does not require a TPM, unlike Windows 11. It may use it if it detects one.
Oh, yes, you're right. It only requires it for BitLocker. Okay.
Which is not relevant here.
Yeah.
It's a very optional feature on a server.
Okay.
Like I said, the comparisons I've done so far haven't been able to be on identical hardware yet. I've got hardware that's now specifically set aside that I can do tests on, so I can do identical tests and I can see how things look on that. But yeah. I just need to get it all installed. That's my project for today. And anyway, that's my piece.
And it sounds like something that should be investigated. But again, you need to VLAN environment, because of course
Yeah.
a stupid little driver difference can explain a lot if you hit a pathological case.
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing more investigation this week. I also have not tested it on FreeBSD. So
If you need help with finding the right tools to dig into problems on FreeBSD, I can help you with that.
okay, I mean that's going to be probably further down the list to see if there's a difference there.
And given that Proxmox also uses ZFS, maybe you can import their pool, or the other way around.
That is my plan. Is to just import the same image and pool.
But yeah, if they enable certain OpenZFS only features in the pool, you could be out of luck.
Not if I make the pool on OmniOS.
Of course not.
It
Unless
should
you hit,
it should import correctly.
sure, you can create a version 28 pool and then use that.
Anyway, we can move on to other things.
I have nothing more really.
Because I didn't mean
Again,
to like totally kill the conversation with my
no need,
problems.
It's just that we don't have more topics.
Yeah, your problem is exciting.
It's more exciting than I want it to be.
I hate Microsoft Server though. So I also have a Windows laptop for work. We get issued these Windows, beautiful ThinkPad with Windows, but with 32 gigs of RAM, and it runs out of memory because Windows is so memory hungry. Maybe you need to the amount of memory you need to allocate for a Windows VM is just ridiculous.
32K is enough for anybody.
32K or 42 gig?
32 gig.
32K is enough for anybody.
Yeah.
32.
As long as you run a fourth system, I would agree, but
Yeah, I hate setting up Windows VMs.
in theory, you can make it fully automated and headless. But unless you
Oh, it's
do it often,
640K. I'm sorry.
unless you do it a lot, it's probably easier to just use bhyve's built-in VNC server to graphically install Windows and then enable RDP and use that from then on.
Yeah.
And I have to admit that RDP has a bunch of nice improvements over just plain old VNC.
Oh yes, RGB is quite nice.
Can feel fairly snappy in a low latency network.
Yes. I'm using RTP over VPN, and it's much better than VNC.
So the bhyve VNC server isn't all the best VNC server. So even with VNC, you could do better than what bhyve does, because if I remember correctly, bhyve doesn't support VNC compression. It's just raw frame buffer. Which is good enough to install.
Anyway, I think I'm gonna drop off
All right.
so that I can get lunch and then continue fighting with this.
All right.
See you next
I'm
week.
also going to drop off.
Hopefully with more information. Bye.